So, y'all, today we are watching the strongest tornado in history in dedication to tornado season. If you don't know, then you know now it is tornado season. There's been a lot of tornadoes that's touched down already. It's going to be a lot more that's touching down. And if you're in the Midwest, take shelter, nigga, because they coming, okay? But today we watching this video, the strongest tornado recorded in history, 2011. Let's get into it, man.
April 27th, 2011. Sirens are blaring across a small town in rural Mississippi as residents make their way to a local storm shelter. Cramming inside, the screams of the sirens begin to fade as a terrible roar gets louder and louder, drowning out the sounds of their panicked breaths as the ground begins to tremble.
If you
The
ain't never been
strongest
in a
tornado
tornado, it
in U.S.
really
history
sound like
has
a
just entered their
train
town.
just coming towards you. Like, it's crazy. Like, I've been in one tornado, and I think it was this one. I'm pretty sure it was
It's
this
late April, and meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center are scanning the atmosphere, looking for key ingredients needed for the formation of severe weather when they notice something concerning. A massive region of low pressure, called a trough, is moving across the United States. This giant,
one. Now, y'all pay
slow-moving
attention
trough
in
is
this
bringing
video.
with
Y'all
it a
might
gulf of
learn something.
extremely
Y'all might
fast-moving
learn
winds aloft, while at the
a lot
same
of
time
things, where to take
drawing in
shelter at, what
inconceivable
to
amounts of
do,
warm, moist
what
air
a
from the Gulf
tornado
of
look like.
Mexico, bringing together a
A
dangerous
lot of people
combination of
don't know. A lot
atmospheric
of people just know
conditions. The
tornado
mixture of warm,
get
moist air
inside, but
with cold,
every
dry
place
air
inside
aloft is
ain't a safe
generating
place.
large amounts of atmospheric instability needed for thunderstorms called convective available potential energy, or CAPE. Additionally, the fast-moving southwesterly winds of the trough are overspreading a powerful, low-level jet of air rushing north, creating incredibly large amounts of both speed and directional wind shear needed to cause thunderstorms to begin rotating. Noting that all the ingredients for severe weather are now in place, the Storm Prediction Center issues a rare,
When
high-risk
cold
outlook for
weather
severe
and
weather,
hot weather,
including a 30%
warm
outlook for
weather
strong tornadoes.
collide and come together,
By 1 a.m.,
make
a
that
tornado
circular
outbreak was
motion,
already underway across
over
Mississippi and
with.
Alabama, as
You already know
unexpected
what's
lines
going
of
down.
powerful thunderstorms called quasi-linear convective systems, or QLCS, moved across the area, spawning over 70 powerful tornadoes along with strong straight-line winds, causing widespread damage to infrastructure, while also
70
leaving behind a dangerous
tornadoes.
thermal boundary
It's
draped across northern
crazy.
Alabama and
70
Mississippi.
tornadoes.
As bad as things were, they were only going to get worse. As the sun begins to heat up the
Oh
atmosphere on
yeah,
April
it sound
27th,
bad.
meteorologists noticed that the storm system was even stronger than expected, prompting them to increase their outlook to an unbelievable 45% risk, noting
Damn.
a major outbreak of intense, long track, and perhaps violent tornadoes is expected. However, none of them could have imagined the scale of what was about to take place.
Look, there he
At
is right there,
10:30 a.m.,
Illinois,
a cluster of storms
right in the
erupts
middle
near
of
Monroe,
everything. And I'm
Louisiana,
telling you,
slowly
that
gaining
tornado hit
strength before merging
where I was
together,
right now, where I am
organizing
right
into a
now.
powerful, rotating
It
thunderstorm
hit
called a
us,
supercell, spinning faster and
man.
faster as the clouds begin reaching towards the ground. Just after 3 p.m., an ominous-looking funnel hovers above the ground and within seconds reaches the surface. The newly formed tornado initially causes only weak damage as it tracks to the northeast, bringing down patches of trees and causing light damage to rural structures. However, just 1 minute later, the tornado rapidly intensifies, completely destroying a couple mobile homes and scattering the debris long
A couple
distances.
mobile homes.
The strengthening tornado
That looked
continues to
like it
cause
came through
intense
about
damage to rural
10 mobile
structures,
homes. Not a
flattening
couple,
large
buddy.
swaths of forest as it
That's
races to the
looking like 10
northeast
of
at over
them.
60 miles
10,
per hour.
11, 12,
It's at
13,
this
14,
moment that
15,
multiple
more
people
than a
begin
lot of
reporting the
couples.
tornado for the first time as it approaches the small towns of Anchor and Dixieland. One of these residents, Jay Rogue, films the tornado as it approaches his location.
Jay Rogan need to go take shelter. You're looking at tornadoes. The last thing you're gonna see is the wind blowing his
With the
ass
roar of
away.
the approaching tornado only getting louder, the family decides to move out of the tornado's way. When they
Good job, Jay.
return, there's little remaining of their
Uses
home.
your head. Yeah, that's crazy.
After sweeping away many homes at EF3 strength, the tornado races off to the northeast, leaving
Usually
behind a
tornadoes
visible
be
scar
going
on the
through
ground, but
like this,
unbeknownst
like
to those in its path, The
with
true power of
nothing.
the monster had yet to be
Places that
unleashed.
have nothing on the
At
ground, like
3:19
not big
p.m., the
cities,
National Weather Service issues
but
a
they do
strongly
gonna
worded
hit
tornado
big
warning
cities and
as the
shit
now
too.
large and extremely dangerous tornado is approaching the small towns of Okolana, New Wren, Amory, and Smithville, Mississippi. After crossing County Road 159, the tornado abruptly begins showing signs of extreme intensification, badly
And it's
debarking trees
intensifying
and
and just
completely
going. It's
leveling
crazy.
well-built homes down to their foundations, with some
Damn,
being completely
demolishing.
swept away. The narrow but violent core of the rapidly expanding tornado became
Y'all want to
so
go live in
intense
Iowa?
that it even began to rip up the earth, creating a nearly mile-long swath of severe ground scouring despite moving at over 60 miles per hour. At this speed and size, this extreme damage is inflicted in less than 2 seconds. At the same moment, local resident Greg Lambert takes a photo of the tornado, revealing the monster wedge as it passes just to his north. 4 miles away on Highway 45 Alternate, 55-year-old Lynn Davis is driving south in his white pickup truck on his way to help his friend Tim, who suffered damage from a tornado earlier that day. While on the phone with Tim, Lynn begins to notice something strange approaching over the trees and utters a chilling phrase. "That looks like a tornado," before the phone call suddenly ends. A semi-truck driver driving directly behind Lynn watches in horror as Lynn's vehicle is peeled off the roadway by the ferocious winds of the tornado. Soaring hundreds of feet into the air, Lynn and his truck begin to orbit around the violent winds of the twister, trapped inside the tornado's grip in a cruel balance of forces as it begins to close
It's
in on the
taking
small
him
community of
on a
Chapel Grove.
trip.
Crashing into the community at peak strength, the tornado inflicts incredible damage to several well-constructed brick homes, completely sweeping them off their foundations, causing intense vegetation damage and scouring the ground. As the tornado moves past town, however, it suddenly begins to weaken, breaking the delicate balance of forces that have trapped Lynn Davis and his truck mid-air, and suddenly,
This
Lynn
boy
comes
is still
crashing
in the
back to
air.
Earth, sadly killing him on impact. Lynn
Oh,
Davis's
duh.
truck had flown an unbelievable 1.7 miles through the air before
Damn.
finally
Only
landing near
2
the
miles
foundation of one of
away.
the destroyed homes, the furthest distance
Little
a
over a
vehicle
mile and
has
a
ever
half.
been thrown by a tornado. Over the next 10 miles, the tornado destroys several homes near the town of New Wren before
Over
finally
the next
dissipating at
10 miles.
3:39
How
p.m.
long was
just
this
north of the city
tornado?
of Amory, Mississippi, claiming the lives of 4 people. However, something far stronger was brewing. As
Shopify Point of Sale makes it
So
easy
that
to start
wasn't
and
even.
grow your retail business. All backed by the world's most
God said,
powerful
hey,
commerce
look,
platform.
y'all want to play
Whether you're running
around?
a retail shop or
I'm going to
online
send y'all
store,
a little
from
test,
startup to
little starter
As the
pack,
first
you know?
tornado
Throw this
begins to
little
weaken,
tornado in
the
there for
parent
y'all.
supercell continues to
See
track to
y'all,
the
how y'all
northeast,
handle that.
drawing closer and closer to
Y'all,
the
that death
dangerous
steady,
thermal
y'all?
boundary
Okay, let
left
me
by
break your
storms
heart real
earlier in
quick.
the day.
Throw the
Near
big
the
one in
boundary,
there.
saturated air and backed winds will lower the storm's base closer to the ground and increase the already incredibly high low-level wind shear, turning an already historic atmosphere into what is possibly the most extreme tornadic environment ever recorded. If the supercell could tap into this environment, a tornado of unimaginable power would be released, and at 3:40
Damn.
p.m., that's exactly what happened. Sirens begin to scream as the supercell merges with a smaller storm to its south, developing a new area of powerful rotation just to the north of the dissipating tornado. While this is happening, 2 amateur storm chasers, Camille Collins and Ashley Hurley, go outside to get a better look at the intensifying storm and begin recording the clouds.
Okay, let's see what's happening. Damn. It just look
Within
a
just a
little
few
dark.
seconds, the two begin to notice a strange-looking cloud passing directly to their northwest that begins rotating incredibly quickly. Moments later, a funnel lowers towards the ground.
That one? I see it.
Hovering just above the surface, the tornado starts its life as a relatively weak vortex, doing little more than snapping trees as it moves along the Tombigbee waterway, but this weak phase is short-lived. The tornado's condensation funnel suddenly reaches the ground and explodes in intensity, drilling a narrow but incredibly intense swath of damage, removing several inches of grass and soil from the surface.
Dang, when they
At the
got on
same
the
time,
ground,
the now
it got
violent
even
tornado
big. It's just
crashes
getting
into a
bigger
forest,
and
flattening
bigger and
every single
bigger.
tree in its path, stripping them of their bark. It's at this moment, however, that something unexpected happens. As the tornado passes through the forest, its core suddenly collapses. Ripped apart by the intense wind shear, the tornado struggles, only inflicting minor damage to trees and low-lying vegetation as it races to the northeast. For a brief moment, it appears as if the residents in the storm's path had just dodged a bullet, avoiding the worst of the storm's wrath.
The jump.
However, this
It
lapse in
jumped.
strength isn't going to last long. Just as fast as it weakened, the tornado strikes a delicate balance between the powerful wind
Oh,
shear
they
trying to
playing with
tear it
him.
apart and the
They
unstoppable
playing with
power
him.
of the storm's updraft trying to keep it together, and a tornadic core of incredible power crashes to Earth. Instantly, all the trees and vegetation surrounding the vortex
From a
are
1 to a
flattened and
2 to a
debarked as the
3
core accelerates from
to a 4
EF1
to
to
a 5.
EF5 intensity in less than 6 seconds. At the same
Damn,
time,
6
the winds
seconds.
inside the vortex become so strong and the pressure drops so violently that the ground begins to literally explode outwards, digging a trench in the ground over a foot deep and 170 yards long. Unbelievably, due to the tornadic core's fast-forward speed and relatively small size, this incredible feat of damage is inflicted in less than half a second. Racing to the northeast at a brutal 63 miles per hour, the tornado begins to set its
Imagine
sights on
that
the
big ass
small town
tornado
of
coming
Smithville,
towards your town.
Mississippi. 3/4 of a mile to the northeast, Tim Nix, along with
Town of
several others,
800.
are frantically descending down the opening
Never
of the
would have
storm
seen it coming.
shelter when they catch a glimpse of the whirling
Tornado was
gray
bigger
mass
than
racing
town.
directly at them. With
Good
just
thing you got a
seconds to
storm
spare,
shelter.
Tim
That's
takes a
smart.
photo of the approaching tornado
Gotta be more
before
than a foot
closing
in
the
the
door to
ground.
the shelter behind him.
Just ripping through that bitch if not.
Rapidly expanding and growing stronger with every second that passes, the tornado impacts the intersection of Davis Road and Highway 25, deeply scouring the ground and completely sweeping away 2 mobile homes as well as a bed and breakfast, granulating the debris into tiny pieces and scattering what was left long distances downwind.
Being in mobile homes
3
is
people
not
are
it.
thrown into the air as their homes disintegrate around them,
And
2
they
of which,
died.
a mother and daughter, are thrown into a nearby culvert and miraculously survive despite
Oh.
major injuries. The third, however, thrown from the bed and breakfast, is sadly killed, becoming the first person to lose their life to the tornado.
And
At
you
the
in
same
the
location, 3 vehicles stood parked near the bed and breakfast, a large RV and 2 semi-trucks. As the core passes, all 3 vehicles soar into the air despite weighing tens of thousands of pounds each. Flying for hundreds of yards, the RV and one of the semi-trucks come crashing to earth, deeply embedding themselves into the ground as unrecognizable husks of scrap metal. The second semi-truck and one of its cargo of 5 65 steel pipes, however, disappears into the tornado and is never seen again, ripped to pieces by the violent winds. Half a mile to the northwest, employees working at the Glover Wilkins Lock and Dam begin to film what they are seeing.
There. Man, that's just to the east of us.
Imagine that.
Man, you ought to see this debris up in there.
The employees watch as the funnel morphs into a large wedge shape, moving incredibly quickly and centrifuging debris in all directions. The tornado has gone from a stout cone to a massive wedge in just 23 seconds. At the same time, 85-year-old Jesse Cox is sheltering in his home when the core overtakes him. The
23
decades-old
seconds
home
is
is no
crazy.
match for the ferocious winds of the core and is completely swept away, with the debris granulated into tiny pieces, sadly resulting in the death of Jesse. The destruction had been so violent that the concrete foundation itself was lifted, chipped, and partially dislodged, along with completely shredding and debarking all vegetation nearby. Continuing to deeply scour the ground, the tornado begins to enter the main part of Smithville and encounters home after home, pulverizing each one in its path and claiming another life. Just ahead on Highway 25, Jimmy Cowley attempts to race ahead of the
Damn.
tornado in his truck,
Everybody
but
just dying.
realizes
That's
he
in his
isn't
path.
going to make it.
You trying to outrun
Jimmy
that?
turns into a driveway as his windows implode around him. His vehicle
Why
is
would you-
lifted into the air and tumbles as if it were made of plastic before crashing back onto the road. Miraculously, Jimmy survives despite receiving a severe laceration to his head from flying debris. However, many of those around him are not as fortunate. 3 more would lose their lives here as their homes are wiped away around them. At one of the destroyed homes, a red Ford Explorer SUV disappears into the vortex, becoming a deadly missile as it flies through the air. As the power within the
it's a
tornado
Ford,
grows stronger, the compact but extremely violent core begins to inflict extreme feats of damage, completely sweeping away homes, throwing vehicles into unrecognizable balls of metal, and creating such a strong suction effect that curtains in nearby homes are sucked up between the ceiling and walls.
Damn.
Some of the most impressive damage,
That's
however,
crazy.
would come from the large trees growing along Highway 25. These trees, weighing several tons each, were not only completely debarked and denuded, but were violently ripped out of the ground and
Ripped out of the
granulated into
ground.
wooden splinters, leaving nothing behind but dirt-filled craters lining the road.
If you was
More
outside,
and
you
more
was just
debris
gonna die.
begins to fill the
Everything
air,
that it was
becoming
picking up
deadly
was gonna
shrapnel
hit
to
you.
anything unlucky
You
enough
was
to be
gonna
caught in
have
its path.
getting
Homes, trees, and
splinters the
businesses
size
alike
of your
all
head from
become
a tree
sandblasted by these deadly
thrown through
high-speed
your head and
projectiles
up.
as the storm barrels through town. Crossing over Main Street, a manhole cover and its steel ring are ripped away, leaving behind a bare concrete hole while the Ford
I'm
Explorer
good.
continues
I'd
to
rather be
soar
in
overhead. Half a mile to the east, a security camera at the
earthquake,
Smithville Police
hurricane.
Department captures the outer edge of the tornado as objects fly across the screen before the video suddenly cuts out. 3 more large, well-built homes are obliterated along Main Street, mutilating trees, scouring the driveways, ripping the plumbing out of the ground, sweeping the foundations clean, and scattering the fragments hundreds of yards away, claiming another life. Scattered across town, numerous people scramble underground or to whatever shelter they can find in the few seconds they have left. The ground began to shake as a deafening roar grew louder and louder. One survivor described the sound as if a giant hammer was pounding the ground over and over again, like a sonic boom that repeats itself. Crashing into a row of mobile homes, the tornado claims another life as it closes in on the
All
Pearson
these
family
mobile
home,
homes.
where Carla Jones
Everybody
is
in
babysitting
mobile
3
homes.
children. With the deafening roar of the
In the
tornado
Midwest,
quickly
right? In
approaching
tornado
and not
central.
enough time to make it
In
to a
mobile
shelter,
homes.
Carla
Why?
rushes the kids into the home's bathtub and lays on top
Or
of
at
them
least
in
do
an
what
effort to shield the
what's his
children
name
from the
did to
worst
have
of
a
the storm.
bunker somewhere where
Despite
you could
going to
go
the
as
safest
shelter
place possible in the
underground.
large 2-story
You're gonna have a
home,
mobile
no
home right in
structure
the
is
middle of
capable of
tornado.
surviving what's coming. The entire home is torn down to the concrete foundation. Incredibly, the home's anchor bolts are ripped up and swept away, leaving nothing behind but a clean slab and completely debarked trees. The 3 children disappear into the vortex and are found 100 yards away on a nearby baseball field, severely injured but somehow still alive. Carla, however, is killed. She was only 37 years old at the time and gave her life to save the 3 children.
You don't want to miss Chickapalooza.
Wow.
Promos by this Saturday only. What is Chickapalooza?
Yeah,
Well,
tornado
it's
don't
see
know
little baby chicks while supplies last.
nothing but suck
Simultaneously,
everything up.
the
No
red
diddy.
Ford Explorer that was picked up half a mile earlier along Highway 25 slams into the Smithville Water Tower, colliding with such extreme force
Oh, that's
it
where
leaves
that
a
Ford
large
went.
6-inch deep dent into the structure's solid
Oh,
steel frame
hey,
before
that's
bouncing off and disappearing back
that's
into
Ford
the
tough
tornado's
for you.
grip. Spotting the
With that
whirling
little
gray
dent in it.
mass just seconds before impact,
So the
Michelle
Ford just
Wardlaw
flying
and her
everywhere,
grandmother
taking a
run across
vacation.
Elm Street for the nearest storm
A trip.
shelter. Unable to hear or speak to each other over the deafening roar, they watch in awe as cars, trees, and pieces of houses fly above their heads. Michelle and her grandmother are swept off their feet by the ferocious winds of the twister, but in an incredible stroke of luck, land inside the doors of the storm shelter, sparing their lives. Their neighbors, however, would not be so fortunate. As the tornado crosses into the town's eastern subdivision, it reaches its maximum intensity, inflicting tornado damage so extreme it
Wow.
seems inconceivable. Deep, extreme ground scouring carves into the surface as half a dozen large, well-built, multi-story homes are wiped off the face of the earth as if they had
Damn.
never existed. The tornado destroys the homes so violently that the debris was granulated into tiny, unrecognizable pieces. Not even a road is able to survive the terrible winds as the tar surface peels away into neatly compacted rolls. Of the 8 people in this area who didn't make it to an underground shelter, not a single one would survive.
Damn.
Like a knife carving into the landscape, the tornado crosses Monroe Street and reaches the
A
Smithville
single
Cemetery and
person
Funeral Home. Gravestones are ripped apart and lofted as the
would
entire
not
brick
make
funeral
it,
home is granulated so violently
even being
that the
close
bricks
to
turn
this
into a
tornado.
fine powder. The only
Unless
things
you
remaining on the property are a
were
bare
just
concrete
lucky.
slab and craters where trees had once stood. Alongside the destroyed funeral home, a red husk of steel lay in a ditch among the debris and debarked vegetation. Unbelievably, this ball of steel was the red SUV picked up along Highway 25 that impacted the Smithville Water Tower.
Damn.
The truck had completed a mile-long journey through the air before finally landing among the devastation at the edge of town. Crawling out from the destruction, a man in town takes out his phone and begins to film the monster tornado.
Just
Its
ripped
roar
everything.
clearly audible from over a mile away. In less than 2 minutes, the entire northern half of Smithville was completely destroyed, leaving behind a hellish landscape and taking the lives of 16 people. But the
Damn.
tornado is far from finished.
Damn.
At
And it's not
3:47
even
p.m.,
done.
the tornado finally
Oh,
exits Smithville
man,
and
what
begins
the
to track through rural forested terrain, growing wider and
How much
wider
longer it
before
got?
reaching
Like
its peak width of
3
nearly a
hours?
mile wide, flattening entire
How
forests
are we
in
gonna
its
stop the
wake.
tornado?
To this day, these images depict some of the worst vegetation damage ever inflicted by a tornado. Darnell Colums, worried about her daughter Camilla,
Y'all better stop
the
messing with the
same
environment,
Camille who
man.
recorded
This
the
shit
tornado's
not
first moments back in
This
Smithville,
shit not funny,
steps
bro. Like
outside
this shit
and
for
captures
real.
the violent wedge passing just to her west. This image is by far the most iconic image ever captured of the tornado. After crossing the Alabama border, the tornado's track begins to shift more to the east, putting the projected path straight towards the town of Hackleburg, itself obliterated by another EF5 tornado just minutes earlier. However, as the tornado approaches, a miracle seems to take place. The path curves farther to the north, sparing the already devastated town, but now moving dangerously close to rural homes northwest of the town of Hamilton. Running to the back porch of a home, Scott Smith films the tornado as it crosses over Interstate 22, passing dangerously close to his home.
We're watching one go across about a mile from us right here, right now. See debris in there. Y'all better take cover.
Damn.
Although not as large and powerful as it had once been, the tornado is rapidly regaining both its size and strength and heading directly towards Highway 19. 2 miles to the north along County Road 157, Dave Forster begins filming the tornado as it passes to his south.
Everybody
Revealing
taking
that
their
within just a
phones
couple
out want to
minutes,
film the
tornado has
tornado.
already morphed
I
back
feel
into a
you, but
large wedge.
this
At the
ain't the
same
tornado
time
to
the
be
video is being
feeling. This is
filmed,
tornado
a
to be
large family home
thinking
along
about
Highway
your life.
19 is directly struck and destroyed. 6 people tragically lose their lives in this single house alone as the walls collapse onto them. Racing through the rural areas at nearly 70 miles per hour, the tornado explosively intensifies, regaining its extremely violent core as it crosses and parallels Highway 20. Thousands of trees are completely debarked and flattened, with even the ground beneath them deeply scoured. No match for the violent winds, a collection of manufactured homes, along with vehicles nearby, disappear into the vortex as if they never existed, scattering metal fragments hundreds of yards away into the obliterated forests. Tragically, 51-year-old Rodney Abels is killed when his home is overtaken by the tornado.
Damn,
Moments
Rodney.
later, his wife Sheila, who survived the Hackleburg tornado earlier that
Come
day,
home to see
arrives
he
home
cool and
only
know
to
that
find
he
a bare
gone.
slab. Continuing to cause incredibly violent damage to trees and rural structures, the tornado remains over mostly forested terrain, avoiding the populated areas north of the town of Hackleburg before
Damn,
beginning
that's
to
sad,
gradually
man.
weaken and finally dissipating 2 miles east of Hodges, Alabama, after being on the ground for nearly 40 miles. The tornado had ended, but the
40
destruction had not.
miles.
All across Mississippi and Alabama, dozens of tornadic supercells in the same volatile atmosphere produce hundreds of strong to violent tornadoes, including 3 other EF5s in the towns of Philadelphia, Hackleburg, and Rainsville, unleashing untold devastation and claiming the lives of 324 people. Back in Smithville,
Damn.
however, the scene was apocalyptic.
324
Those that
people.
survived emerged into a barren wasteland with everything around them completely unrecognizable. 23 people lost their lives, while countless others suffered severe, life-altering injuries. The damage, however, was nothing short of incredible. The tornado dug deep trenches into the ground, threw vehicles miles through
Mother
the air,
Nature don't play, bro.
obliterated entire
So don't play
forests,
with Mother
and
Nature.
completely swept away numerous
That's his
well-built
bottom line.
structures
Just
and
don't play with
granulated
Mother
them into
Nature.
dust,
Mother Nature don't play.
doing all
You can
this while
clearly
moving
see
at over 60
she
miles
don't
per
fuck
hour.
around.
This
She don't
combination of
play.
incredible damage
Look at
and
this.
rapid forward speed, along
Rip
with
the
existing
ground
in one of the
out.
most extreme tornadic environments ever documented, lead many to believe that Smithville is the strongest tornado in recorded history.
Gotta be. Gotta be.
14
The strongest ever. So let's not go back to Smithville. Let's not go back to 2011, okay? Let's stop playing around with Mother Nature. How about that? How about we stop playing around with her? In the next one, man.